miigwech for coming to ECU School and miigwech for sharing your teachings with us.
Miigwech. Miigwech. Okay, bonjour. Ogimaa Negotiator goya kasit jinakaz Batchewana donji gajak todam ishnabe nene endao. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chief Dean Sayers. I'm the Chief of Batchewana First Nation, and it's an honor. It feels really good to come here and be with you guys this afternoon to take some questions and see if I can handle your questions. I think I should be able to. I'll do my best anyway to provide some answers. A lot of the answers that I'm going to try and share with you are some of the answers that people have shared with me over a lot of years. And some of the people that shared these answers with me are like close to 100 years old. And they remember things from a long time ago. So the elders really share lots of things with me that I need to remember when I do my job as Chief of Batchewana First Nation. And what happens if you don't share what you know, you'll forget it and you'll lose it, and then the next generations won't have it. So I want to do my best to be able to come and talk to the schools and talk to the students and share our perspectives so that it's there in the future too, because a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about, you won't find them in the books, but it's really important. It's our story rather than his story. History is his story. We have our story, and I'm going to try and share our story with you from what I understand it to be. So thank you for taking some time to come up with some questions, and I'm looking forward to that.
so much for joining us. I wanted to speak to you about some of the concerns you might have surrounding the Great Lakes and specifically Lake Superior.
Well, there's an assumption of jurisdiction by the settler governments here, in particular the Canadian and the American governments, and the states and the provinces that are in close proximity to the Great Lakes. We have a lot of reserved jurisdictions as the indigenous tribes and the indigenous governments. And again, that's never been extinguished. We've sat back, we've watched. It was illegal for us. We were murdered, we were killed up till the 1950s when we started to talk about the assertion of our reserved jurisdictions. And when it became legal for us to actually start talking about it, confronting it, addressing it, we found that the condition of the Great Lakes were in dire straits. We look at the introduction of smelts back in the early 1940s, eradicated our natural native trout populations across the Great Lakes. We look at the introduction of the sports fishermen and the different, people, anglers wanted to see the introduction of salmon again. Carnivores eradicated our natural native fishery. We see the International Joint Commission opening up compensating gates in Sault Ste. Marie based on corporate interests, flooding our wild rice beds, flooding our spawning grounds, without even any caution to the First Nations, without any real substance for our input in how the Great Lakes are managed.
At the largest nuclear power plant in the world, plans to store radioactive waste deep underground. Nearby homes and summer cottages line the beaches of Lake Huron. That's where opposition to burying the waste began, among those who've enjoyed the lakeside scenery for generations.
Some of it's going to be radioactive for 100,000 years. We don't know. We can't guarantee and we can't plan what's going to happen in 100,000 years. So, we just can't let that happen.
Ontario Power Generation, a government-owned utility, wants to dig waste storage chambers 680 meters beneath the Bruce Power Plant site. Officials say the thick limestone bedrock won't allow radioactivity to contaminate land or water.
Indicate that there is no risk to Lake Huron. We understand the geology under the site where we're going to be placing this waste, and we don't see any impact at all.
Storing radioactive waste anywhere is controversial, but putting it next to a lake that's shared with the United States and provides drinking water to tens of millions of people is another level of challenge entirely. At public hearings into the waste storage issue, U.S. legislators came from neighboring Michigan to express their opposition. Community leaders in other U.S. states have also objected.
Great Lakes are our life and livelihood. They matter to us in Michigan as much as, if not more than anybody. We're, as a state, defined literally by the Great Lakes.
But polls show widespread support for the nuclear industry in the quiet country towns around the Bruce Power Plant. Thousands of plant employees live here, and the community actively sought the construction of a waste storage facility.
We wanted to be proactive and take a leadership position as opposed to, taking the easy way and just saying, no, we would consider it.
This is Canada's first real attempt to deal with decades of accumulated waste, and making a decision that satisfies all sides of the debate is probably going to be impossible.
We as the Native people around the Great Lakes, in particular in Ontario, 133 First Nation tribes have said no more eradicating of our environment, no more raping the lakes, no more management by the foreigners of the Great Lakes. we are taking a jurisdiction back over in Ontario, and we made a water declaration. This water is in the care and control of the First Nations people. This assumption of jurisdiction and making these decisions on the part of these visiting governments is so far away from the legal reality of what actually the visitors have as law and jurisdiction. So it's a challenge for us. So I'm here to make those types of statements. No more. We cannot condone it. The environment can't condone it. We can't condone the corporate interests. We can't compromise our environment anymore. We can't live with the possibility of pipelines breaking in the water. We look at the Mackinac Straits in Michigan, between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. If that pipeline under the water ever busts, it's going to really have a huge detrimental effect on the quality of life of probably 15 million people around Lake Michigan and Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. And it's just terrible. There doesn't seem to be this long-term thinking on the part of the settler governments here.
And how confident are you that you will get control back?
Well, I have to make the assertion. I have a long litany of my ancestors that have put me into this position today to make these assertions. We have to make the assertions. We are going to sit at the tables that we set around jurisdiction. We can't sit at these tables where we are 5 or 6 levels down from actually having any real input into things. We can't endorse that. We are the first level of government with regards to the Great Lakes management and jurisdiction.
Is there a chance of reversing the damage, or do you think it's too late?
Well, prayer, ceremony, Indigenous knowledge can take us a long way. There needs to be investments, and it needs to be designed and implemented and managed by Indigenous leadership based on our cultural values. Our historical, still knowledgeable people have that awareness on how we can fix things. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. It took us 500 years to get this far with the erosion. It's going to take us quite a while to get back to where we need to be with the quality of the Great Lakes.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. Chief,
Thank you, Nam.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, Niwin Nimki, the Crow Hop. Watch these dancers, ladies and gentlemen. And if you ever see a crow on the highway, that's how they jump. I used to wonder, how could they call it a crow hop?
If you want to stay in those communities, how do we make them viable?
You honor the treaty obligations that you, as the visiting people to these lands, have with us. I think there was a sharing relationship that needs to be fulfilled. And I look at a $900 billion budget in Ontario and an offer of $30 million a year as resource revenue sharing. That's a slap in the face. That's so small that it wouldn't even sustain us if we looked at, and that's 30 million over 5 years. That was really a poor attempt by Ontario to share our revenues from our resources. We're owed 50% of those resource revenues, not that less than 1% or whatever the number might have been. So we need to properly deal with the treaty, and Ontario needs to implement those treaties.
Bear Creek.
see, I've been doing reports at the Fukushima radiation tree reports about all the dead trees everywhere, and you can see there's a lot of dead trees here. This is middle of June, and all these trees should have leaves already on them. They're not doing good. Not good at all. That's pretty scary. I don't even see any buds on the trees. We just had a heavy rainfall, but you would never know by looking around here. Too many dead trees everywhere. They're not healthy. Look, everything's dying.
The Great Lakes, the largest basin of freshwater in the world. From Thunder Bay in the west to the Gulf of St. Lawrence in the east and as far south as the Illinois River. The Great Lakes deliver fresh water to 40 million people in cities, towns, and villages in Canada and the United States. They irrigate hundreds of millions of acres of farmland and support the world's largest inland fishery. Not the most logical place to build a nuclear waste dump. Yet unbelievably, that is exactly what Ontario Power Generation is planning to do. OPG proposes to abandon radioactive waste in a dump on the shore of the Great Lakes that will risk our waters for up to 1 million years. Their underground nuclear waste dump is less than 1 kilometer, about 900 yards from the shore of Lake Huron at the Bruce nuclear plant. OPG says they will use proven technology to dig their dump as deep as Toronto's CN Tower is high, and that the radioactive waste will be isolated forever. OPG's dump technology is anything but proven. Every underground nuclear waste dump in the world has failed and leaked its deadly toxins. Experts say it is not if, but when the dump will leak radioactive gases and material into the ground as material in the dump decompose. Even OPG's experts admit the dump will eventually fill with water, become unstable, and leak. When it leaks, it could contaminate the drinking water of 40 million people and our environment forever. Unless you help us stop it. We are SOS Great Lakes, a non-profit group of Canadians and Americans who started fighting this in 2012. We are challenging OPG's dump in the Canadian Federal Court. More than 184 Canadian and American municipalities oppose this plan. A growing number of U.S. politicians are urging politicians in Canada to stop this project. Join us. Share this story. Help end this threat to the largest body of fresh water in the world. Please, help us tell this important story. Urge your politicians to act responsibly. Donate to help us win this fight. Your lakes, your choice.